Some robberies are about desperation, others are about legend. Over the last century, a handful of heists have risen above the rest, not just for the staggering amounts stolen, but for the boldness, planning, and sheer audacity of those who pulled them off. From tunnels carved under bustling streets to priceless jewels lifted in minutes, these are crimes that shook cities, humiliated security systems, and left police baffled for years, sometimes forever. Welcome to our countdown of the top 10 armed robberies that haunted the world. Daring crimes that proved fortune really does favor the bold, and sometimes, the ruthless. Before we start, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification button so that you won't miss any of our chilling stories that will keep you at the edge of your seat. Number 1. Banco Central Burglary, the tunnel that shook Brazil. It was the perfect illusion. On a quiet street in Fortaleza, Brazil, a small storefront with a faded green awning appeared to be home to a landscaping company. Locals saw workers hauling soil, rolling in pallets of grass, and carrying bags of plants. No one suspected that behind the hum of lawnmowers and chatter, one of the most daring bank robberies in modern history was being planned just a few meters underground. The criminals behind the heist were not amateurs. They were part of an organized gang that had studied the Banco Central branch in Fortaleza for months. Their plan was ambitious: bypass the heavily guarded front doors, the security cameras, and the armed guards not from the street, but from below. In early 2005, they rented a commercial property about 2 blocks from the bank. They registered a legitimate-looking landscaping business, complete with flyers, uniforms, and a painted delivery truck. Neighbors saw men coming and going at all hours, loading and unloading equipment. But what no one saw was the 256-foot tunnel slowly snaking its way toward the bank vault. The tunnel was a feat of engineering. Just under the city streets, it stretched nearly the length of a football field. It was reinforced with wood, lined with plastic to keep soil from collapsing, and even fitted with electric lighting and air conditioning. Inside, the team worked in shifts, digging, hauling dirt, and passing it back through the landscaping business, where it was discreetly loaded into trucks and driven away. It took 3 months of back-breaking labor. By August, the tunnel reached directly beneath the bank's vault. And here was the key: unlike most bank vaults, the Banco Central's floor wasn't reinforced with steel, only thick concrete. Using drills and tools, they breached it from below, emerging into the vault like ghosts. Friday, August 5th, 2005. The gang moved in. They worked through the weekend, knowing the bank would remain closed until Monday morning. Inside the vault were stacks of cash Brazilian reais bundled in plastic-wrapped bricks. The robbers had chosen this particular vault for a reason. It stored money that was about to be removed from circulation, meaning the notes were unmarked and untraceable. Over the next hours, they hauled 3.5 metric tons of cash through the tunnel, loading it into trucks parked at the landscaping shop. By the time Monday came, the vault was nearly empty. When bank employees unlocked the vault on Monday morning, they froze. The reinforced door was untouched. The alarms had never gone off. Yet the money worth approximately US $70 million was gone. News of the heist exploded across Brazil and the world. This was no smash and grab. This was precision, patience, and audacity on a level rarely seen. The media dubbed it the robbery of the century. Federal police swarmed the scene. Investigators traced the origin of the tunnel and quickly found the rented landscaping shop. Inside, the walls were bare, the equipment gone. The only thing left was a gaping hole in the floor leading into darkness. Fingerprints, shoe prints, and scattered tools offered the first leads. But the gang had a head start, and much of the money vanished into Brazil's vast underground economy. Over the next year, police arrested dozens of suspects linked to the heist. But catching them was one thing, recovering the cash was another. Authorities managed to find only a small fraction of the stolen money. Some bills surfaced during drug busts or real estate seizures. Others disappeared forever. As the months passed, the case took a darker turn. Several suspects met violent ends, some murdered in gang disputes. Others suspected of being killed by partners over disagreements about the split. Rumors spread of laundering operations, offshore accounts, and hidden stashes buried in remote parts of Brazil. One chilling theory suggested that much of the money was used to finance other criminal enterprises, drug trafficking, arms smuggling, and more robberies. For the gang, the Banco Central heist wasn't just a payday, it was an investment in a criminal empire. Among those arrested was Luis Fernando Ribeiro, a man believed to be one of the key organizers. A career criminal, Ribeiro had the connections, resources, and patience to coordinate the operation. But even his capture didn't solve the mystery of where most of the money went. Today, the Banco Central Burglary remains one of the largest bank robberies in history, both in Brazil and worldwide. It was a blueprint for how far planning, discipline, and disguise can go in outsmarting a secure institution. The image of workers in overalls, pretending to plant flowers while secretly digging toward millions, has become part of Brazilian criminal folklore. And the unanswered questions still fuel public fascination. How much of the money is still out there? Who ordered the hits on some of the gang members? And could there be another tunnel somewhere in Brazil waiting for the right moment? One thing is certain: the audacity of the Banco Central gang has ensured their place in criminal history. It was the perfect crime until the cracks began to show. In Fortaleza, the hum of a lawnmower once masked the sound of shovels scraping against earth. And beneath the city's streets, in the cool darkness of a tunnel, 3 tons of cash changed hands, never to be seen again. If digging a tunnel beneath a bustling Brazilian city wasn't bold enough, our next heist took place in the middle of a war zone, with the thieves walking straight through the front door. Number 2, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist. Boston's $500 million vanishing act. It was a cold, quiet night in Boston. March 18, 1990, St. Patrick's Day, had just faded into the early hours. While most of the city slept off its celebrations, 2 men in police uniforms were on their way to commit the most expensive art theft in history. At 1:24 a.m., a small hatchback pulled up outside the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, a Venetian-style building tucked into the Fenway neighborhood. Inside, 2 security guards monitored the silent halls lined with priceless paintings, tapestries, and artifacts. The 2 officers buzzed at the side door, claiming they were responding to a disturbance. Their timing seemed believable. Rowdy behavior after a holiday night was nothing unusual. One guard, against protocol, opened the door. The moment he did, the officers ordered him to step away from the desk. The guards were quickly handcuffed, duct-taped, and led to the basement. One of the thieves told them, "This is a robbery. Don't give us a problem and you won't get hurt." They wrapped tape around the guards' heads and eyes, leaving only their noses exposed, and chained them to pipes. For the next 81 minutes, the thieves had the museum entirely to themselves. They moved with purpose, not randomly smashing and grabbing, but selecting specific pieces. Among the stolen works, the concert by Johannes Vermeer, one of only 34 known paintings by the Dutch master. Rembrandts' The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, his only known seascape. A Man and Lady in Black, another Rembrandt, a Chinese bronze beaker from the Shang dynasty. 5 Degas drawings, a bronze eagle finial from a Napoleonic flag. In total, 13 pieces were taken. Their combined value is now estimated at over $500 million, the largest recorded property theft in history. Security footage showed something odd. The thieves didn't just remove paintings from their frames, they slashed several canvases out with box cutters, leaving behind ragged edges. Some pieces of great value were left untouched, suggesting the thieves had either been given a shopping list or lacked deep art knowledge. They also made 2 trips to their vehicle, indicating they knew exactly how long they could work before suspicion might arise. The next morning, the day shift guard found the side door ajar. Inside, the empty frames hung eerily on the walls. Museum policy was to leave them that way in hopes the stolen art might one day return. The FBI was called immediately. They treated it not as a petty burglary, but as a major organized crime operation. Over the decades, the case has attracted countless theories. Some believe the heist was the work of Boston's notorious Winter Hill Gang, possibly led by mobster Whitey Bulger. Others suspect it was connected to the Patriarca crime family. Another theory points to international art smugglers, suggesting the paintings were used as black market collateral in drug or arms deals. Despite interrogations, informants, and undercover operations, no one has ever been charged with the theft itself. In 2013, the FBI announced it believed it had identified the 2 thieves, both deceased members of a New England crime ring, but refused to release their names. They claimed the art had been moved through Connecticut and Philadelphia in the years after the heist, before disappearing into the black market. The Gardner Museum continues to offer a $10 million reward for information leading to the recovery of the works, the largest private reward ever offered. The stolen pieces are irreplaceable, both in value and cultural significance. Vermeer's The Concert is considered one of the most important missing artworks in the world. Rembrandt's Storm on the Sea of Galilee is instantly recognizable, making it nearly impossible to sell openly. The fact that none of the pieces have surfaced in over 30 years makes the Gardner Heist one of the most enduring mysteries in the art world. The heist has inspired documentaries, podcasts, books, and even fictionalized portrayals in films. The sight of the empty frames, still hanging in the museum to this day, has become a haunting symbol of loss. Visitors walk through those rooms knowing they are standing where masterpieces once hung, stolen in the dead of night by two men who vanished without a trace. They came dressed as police, but their real authority came from precision and fear. In 81 minutes, they stripped the Gardner Museum of treasures that may never be seen again. And until they return, the ghosts of those empty frames will continue to haunt Boston's art world. Number 3. The Antwerp Diamond Heist. The School of Turin's perfect crime, Antwerp, Belgium, the diamond capital of the world. Inside its heavily guarded diamond district, billions of dollars worth of stones pass through vaults and dealers' hands each year. Security is tight, the streets are lined with cameras, and police patrol constantly. But in February 2003, a team of master thieves proved that no fortress is impenetrable. The operation was led by Leonardo Notarbartolo, an Italian career criminal with charm, skill, and a network of equally talented associates. Notarbartolo wasn't just a burglar. He was an actor, a con man, and an artist in deception. His crew became known as La Scuola di Torino, the School of Turin, for their precision and sophistication. Months before the heist, Notarbartolo moved to Antwerp under a false identity. He posed as a gem dealer, renting an office in the Antwerp Diamond Center itself, the very building that housed the target vault. This gave him insider access to the building's layout, the routines of security staff, and crucially, a legitimate pass to bypass the front door. The Diamond Center vault was said to be one of the most secure in the world. 10 layers of security stood between a thief and the diamonds. It was located 2 floors underground. It had a heat and motion sensor system, a magnetic lock, and infrared detectors. The door was made of steel with a time lock mechanism and required both a key and a combination. The vault stored hundreds of safe deposit boxes belonging to Antwerp's diamond traders. On any given day, those boxes held hundreds of millions in gems. Notarbartolo's team spent over 2 years preparing. They studied the guards' habits, learned how to avoid CCTV blind spots, and even built a full-scale replica of the vault to practice breaking in. They discovered weaknesses. The security cameras inside the vault didn't record, they only monitored live feeds. The heat sensors could be fooled with carefully crafted styrofoam panels. The magnetic door contact could be bypassed with a strip of aluminum to keep it closed in the system's eyes. On the weekend of February 15th to 16th, 2003, the Diamond District was quiet. While most traders were away, the School of Turin slipped into the building. Notarbartolo used his legitimate pass to enter without raising suspicion. In the vault room, they disabled the cameras, covered the heat sensors, and used their pre-practiced tricks to bypass the magnetic lock. The combination lock? They already had it, obtained months earlier by discreetly filming the vault guard opening it. Once inside, they went to work on the safe deposit boxes, using hand tools to pry them open. They didn't take everything, only what was easiest to carry and sell: loose diamonds, gold, and jewelry. When they left, they didn't trigger a single alarm. By the time they were done, they had stolen over US $100 million in uncut diamonds and other gems. It was one of the largest diamond thefts in history. The vault door was found locked the next morning, but dozens of boxes had been emptied. When police arrived, they were stunned. No forced entry. No alarms. No broken cameras. The thieves had seemed to vanish like ghosts, but every perfect crime leaves traces. In this case, it was trash. A bag of garbage from the heist, food wrappers, bits of tape, and receipts, was dumped along a roadside near Brussels. Inside, investigators found a receipt with Notarbartolo's name on it. DNA evidence on a partially eaten sandwich linked him to the scene. Within weeks, Belgian police arrested Notarbartolo and several of his crew. In 2005, he was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. 3 other Italians were also convicted, but key members of the gang escaped arrest. The vast majority of the loot was never recovered. Notarbartolo claimed he'd been hired by a shadowy diamond dealer to simulate a theft for insurance fraud, and that many of the gems were actually gone before the break-in. Police never confirmed this story, and most believe it was a smokescreen. The diamonds are likely long gone, recut, sold, and scattered across the globe. The Antwerp diamond heist has been called the heist of the century. It exposed vulnerabilities in even the most secure systems and became a blueprint for high-level organized theft. Its mix of elegance, audacity, and mystery still fascinates criminologists and the public alike. They had keys, they had codes, they had time. In one weekend, the School of Turin proved that the world's diamond capital could be robbed from the inside out. And with most of the loot still missing, the sparkle of that night continues to haunt Antwerp. Number 4. The Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Raid. The Diamond Geezer's Job. It was Easter weekend, 2015. In London's Hatton Garden district, the beating heart of the UK's jewelry trade, shop owners locked their doors, set their alarms, and headed home for a 4-day holiday. The vaults beneath Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Limited were considered unbreakable. But that weekend, a crew of men, most in their 60s and 70s, proved that old dogs still had dangerous tricks. The gang wasn't made up of young, hooded smash-and-grab thugs. These were seasoned career criminals with decades of burglary experience. Media would later dub them the Diamond Geezers, a mix of charm, wit, and ruthless efficiency. The ringleader, Brian Reeder, 76 at the time, was a veteran of the 1983 Brinks-Mat gold bullion heist. His associates included men with reputations in London's underworld stretching back to the 1970s. They weren't there for petty cash. They were after millions in jewels, cash, and gold. The gang had been planning for months. They knew the Easter holiday was the perfect window. No staff for 4 days, no business activity, and a quiet financial district. The vault was located 2 floors underground. The direct entrance? Impenetrable. But the crew found another way, an elevator shaft that led to a side wall of the vault itself. On Thursday, April 2, 2015, after the district emptied out, the men entered the building disguised as workmen. They disabled the lift, rappelled down the shaft, and set up powerful drills. Their target was the vault wall, half a meter of reinforced concrete. Using an industrial diamond-tipped drill, they cut through the wall, creating a hole just big enough to crawl through. Inside, rows of safe deposit boxes gleamed under dim fluorescent light. Each box belonged to a jeweler, dealer, or wealthy individual, many storing their most valuable possessions. The first night's attempt didn't go as planned. A piece of machinery failed, forcing the crew to retreat and regroup. Incredibly, they returned 2 nights later to finish the job, confident no one had noticed their presence. Once inside, they cracked open 73 safe deposit boxes using angle grinders and crowbars. They filled bags with diamonds, sapphires, emeralds, gold bars, luxury watches, and stacks of cash. The total haul was estimated between £14 million and £20 million, though exact figures remain contested, as many victims refused to disclose the full value of their losses. On Tuesday, April 7th, employees arrived to find chaos. Dozens of boxes lay open and emptied. Jewelry dust, broken locks, and fragments of valuables littered the floor. The breach in the vault wall, a jagged, almost cartoonish hole, told the story of how the unbreakable vault had been breached. Scotland Yard's flying squad, the same elite unit that had hunted London's biggest armed robbers, took the case. CCTV footage from outside the building showed shadowy figures in high-visibility vests, hauling bags through the night. A white van linked to the suspects was traced through London's ANPR, automatic number plate recognition system. And then came the break. Covert microphones placed in a pub caught several of the suspects bragging about the job. They spoke in almost nostalgic tones, as if they had reclaimed their youth for one last score. In May 2015, police arrested most of the gang. They ranged in age from their late 50s to late 70s. Reeder, 76, was arrested while driving his Mercedes, a reminder that he'd seen big scores before. In 2016, 7 men were sentenced to a combined 34 years in prison. The trial revealed the meticulous planning, the use of old-school methods, and the fact that millions in stolen goods were still missing. The Hatton Garden raid quickly became part of British criminal folklore. The public was fascinated by the idea of gentlemen thieves, elderly men pulling off the heist of the decade. But the victims, many of them small jewelers, saw nothing romantic in the crime. Some lost their life savings. Even after arrests, much of the loot was never recovered. Authorities believe it was melted down, recut, or quickly sold on the black market. The job has been called the last of the old-school heists. It inspired books, documentaries, and multiple films. But behind the legend is a simple truth. Age didn't stop them, but overconfidence did. They were old enough to be grandfathers, but that Easter weekend, they were kings of the underworld. The Hatton Garden Raid was their masterpiece, and their downfall. Number 5. The Great Train Robbery, the heist that stopped a nation. It was the early hours of August 8, 1963, in the quiet countryside of Buckinghamshire, England. A Royal Mail train, loaded with cash from Glasgow to London, was thundering through the darkness. On board were millions in banknotes, money that was due to be retired and destroyed. It should have been an uneventful journey. Instead, it became one of the most infamous robberies in British history. The train's second carriage held something extraordinary, £2.6 million in used banknotes, worth the equivalent of over £50 million today. Security was minimal. The Royal Mail train was considered secure simply by virtue of being in constant motion and staffed by trusted postal workers. But someone had tipped off a London gang that this night's load would be unusually large. The robbery was masterminded by Bruce Reynolds, a suave career criminal with connections across London's underworld. His crew included hardened criminals and some men with military and railway experience. The plan was simple but audacious. Stop the train in a remote location. Subdue the crew. Empty the cash into waiting vehicles. They chose Bridego Bridge, a rural overpass near Ledburn, as the ambush site. At around 3 a.m., the train driver, Jack Mills, saw a red signal light ahead and slowed to a stop. Unbeknownst to him, the robbers had tampered with the railway signal, replacing the green light with a red one by attaching a 6-volt battery to the circuit. When the train halted, masked men swarmed it. 2 boarded the engine and overpowered Mills. In the struggle, Mills was struck on the head with an iron bar, leaving him unconscious. The gang had expected the second locomotive driver to move the train forward to the bridge. But the replacement driver panicked, forcing the robbers to uncouple the targeted carriages and move them themselves. Once in position, they formed a human chain, passing heavy sacks of cash down into waiting trucks. In just 30 minutes, they cleared 120 sacks, a total of £2.6 million in notes. The gang drove to Leatherslade Farm, a rented property in rural Buckinghamshire, where they planned to lay low until the heat died down. They listened to the news and laughed as the robbery made headlines. But their discipline didn't last. Against Reynolds' orders, some played cards, leaving fingerprints on the game pieces. Others were careless about disposing of supplies. When they abandoned the farm days later, police found it, and with it, a goldmine of forensic evidence. Scotland Yard launched one of the largest manhunts in British history. Within weeks, police had identified and arrested many of the gang members. Public fascination grew with each new capture, especially as newspapers painted the robbers as working-class folk heroes who had outsmarted the system. In 1964, 11 of the robbers were convicted and handed massive sentences to 30 years each. This shocked many, as armed robbery sentences were rarely that long, even in violent cases. The government wanted to make an example of them. But the story didn't end there. In 1965, gang member Ronnie Biggs famously escaped from Wandsworth Prison by climbing a wall and fleeing in a waiting van. He began a decades-long life on the run, living in France, Spain, and eventually Brazil, where British extradition requests were denied. Biggs became a folk legend, a symbol of rebellion to some, a criminal opportunist to others. While most of the gang was caught, the majority of the money was never recovered. Some say it was laundered through criminal enterprises. Others believe it was buried and lost forever. Over the years, the robbery inspired countless books, TV dramas, and films. But the romanticized version hides the darker reality. Train driver Jack Mills never fully recovered from his injuries and died in 1970, reportedly still suffering from the head wound inflicted that night. The Great Train Robbery is still studied as a masterclass in planning, timing, and execution, and also in how criminal overconfidence leads to capture. It was a crime that combined old-fashioned banditry with modern logistics, carried out not by desperate amateurs but by a crew who treated it like a military operation. It was supposed to be the perfect heist, fast, clean, and without lasting harm. But the great train robbery stopped more than a train that night. It stopped a nation in its tracks. In the end, some of these criminals paid the price. Others disappeared into legend, their names whispered in bars and backrooms, their loot never found. But each of these heists left behind more than missing money and stolen jewels. They left a mark on history, a reminder that human ingenuity can be both brilliant and dangerous. Which of these robberies do you think was the most daring? And how many of these treasures do you believe are still out there, waiting to be found? If you enjoyed this journey through the world's most audacious crimes, hit subscribe because the next story we tell might just be about the one that's happening right now.